Well, hello, my friends. I'm here with Laura Stastny. She is the executive director, Nebraska Wildlife Rehab. Honestly, one of my truly favorite nonprofits, just near and dear to my heart. Laura, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's so great to be back with you, Andy.
Okay, so lots going on. Here we are, kind of getting into September. We had, there's always so much that you guys are doing at any time during the year, and it changes throughout the year. But I want to just kind of start and touch on, we had that big storm blow through on July 31st, which knocked over hundreds and hundreds of trees. And um, so I'm going to let you kind of take it from there because what do you need? And let's just talk about the storm first, and then we'll talk
Sure.
about, the fall and whatnot. So,
Yeah. So weather events are one of the major natural causes for wildlife to come in for us. And
yeah.
depending on when they hit, sometimes they make a major impact and sometimes it's kind of minor. That storm that came through on July 31st did affect birds, which are people expect to be in the trees. But the major effect was on fox squirrels, so tree squirrels.
Okay.
So our eastern fox squirrels have 2 litters a year, and they were right in the middle of their second litter being in the nest. And so in the 48 hours after that storm, we took in 400 animals
Wow.
when normally we would have taken in about 50.
Oh my
And
goodness. Yeah.
yeah, and about 75% of those were baby fox squirrels. So they were tree squirrels that still had their eyes closed. Their trees were destroyed and the areas around there were destroyed. So people in the public were able to reunite some of them with their mothers, but a lot of them were injured from branches coming down and things like that. So we did get about 300 squirrels in that 48 hours after the storm, which is an unprecedented number.
Yeah.
Not happened in the 25-year history of our organization.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit further. I mean, what do you do? I mean, what do you do with that? With all these? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's crisis mode and it's all hands on deck.
Yeah.
And so what we had to do in that case is we called back some old wildlife rehabilitators who've worked with us in the past and asked them to help kind of defray the number that were here at the wildlife center. And then our staff just showed up and kicked it into overdrive, and they were taking, the nursery was full, the squirrel nursery was full, and they were just feeding almost around the clock. So in the weeks after the storm, our staff was working from 6 a.m. to 4 a.m.
Yeah.
So 22 hours a day.
So I'm going to ask you a question that I don't know if I've ever asked you this, because first of all, I am so dedicated and appreciate what Nebraska Wildlife Rehab does, but why is it important? I mean, why is it important to save squirrels? I mean, or
Yeah,
like, yeah, why?
I think that's a really common question that people have because we do put a lot of time and resources and energy into saving wildlife that some people would consider common.
Yeah,
And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I think compassion for animals is important. It's an important thing to teach our children, and it's an important thing that kind of bleeds over into all the other parts of our lives. And we are here to provide a service that you require, that's required, a license is required for. So you have to have a license to care for native wildlife.
yeah,
And that's also important that, people often find wildlife in need, and if they don't have someone to take it to, they will try to care for it themselves.
mm,
But the reality, and I think COVID also kind of got this on people's radars, is that wildlife can carry diseases and parasites that
yeah,
are transmissible to our pets and to us. And so it's extremely important that people don't try to raise wildlife themselves in their homes, and that they get them to somebody licensed who knows what the risks are.
yeah,
Um, and then the other part of that is that, these animals may seem common, but they're related to other animals out there that might be endangered. In addition to that, other animals are slipping out of common and into the endangered range every day in our world. An example of that is we have a bat called the northern long-eared bat that 10 years ago was common in our state, and it's now on the federal endangered species list. When we care for these common animals and figure out the protocols that we need, the diets, nutrition, veterinary medicine, that data can be used to take care of those endangered animals and help us with assurance colonies and keeping animals from slipping into extinction across the globe. So there's lots of reasons for compassion for the life of one animal, public health, the data that we collect to help other endangered species. All of that is critical. And that's why we rehab. That's why we take care of these animals.
Yeah. And I'm curious, what the bats that you just mentioned, why are they now on the endangered species list?
The primary reason for the northern long-eared myotis to go on the endangered species list is that a fungus called white nose syndrome has swept across the United States over the last decade or so, likely introduced from caves in Europe by people transmitting the fungus across the ocean. And it's slowly marched across the United States and affected bats, all sorts of bat species in between the East Coast, and now it's reached the West Coast. It disrupts hibernation and then causes bats to starve to death. And so when it gets into the caves where these bats are hibernating, it causes huge deaths. And our bats in the United States, insectivorous bats, they only give birth to 1 or 2 babies a year. And so they reproduce really slowly. So when you have mass die-offs of bats, they can't reproduce their numbers quickly like some other animals can. And so the effects of mass die-offs are really devastating.
Yeah. Which is also, I mean, just traveling from one country to another, which I think, I don't know, I think some people just don't realize, like when they're asking you those questions, are you transporting this with you? Are you taking this with you? I mean, you really need to understand that it's just not them, whatever countries are being weird or whatnot. I mean, for lack of a better word, I mean, there are things that then can come into a different population, a different vegetation, and then it creates havoc.
Yeah, so invasive plants, insects, fungus, bacteria, all of those things travel on natural goods and can affect our economy and, of course, our native wildlife.
Yeah. Well, back to again, the storm that happened. I mean, on July 31st, I was actually just watching a video that I took outside of my home on that day, and just really, it was like there was no wind, and then there was like massive wind, and then I'm like, I need to go inside. And I did think about when all was said and done, with trees falling over, but even if the trees didn't fall over, I mean, I always think about the birds. I mean, I do think about the birds and the squirrels and that live in these trees, and where do they go, and what happens to them. So we talked about the squirrels, but let's just just overall, how can people help with that? And then we'll talk about the bigger picture of how people can help, throughout the year.
Yeah, and so for the squirrels, they're mostly doing well, and they're getting up to be an older age. So there's a couple of ways people can help specifically with those animals. The first is cash donations. That was a huge influx of animals, and it does cost us about $145 per animal to get them through the entire rehab process, and that includes veterinary admission, ongoing veterinary care, husbandry, caging, food, all of that, right? The other thing is, if people are really interested and they own land outside of city limits, and particularly more than 10 acres of land, and they're interested in being a release site for squirrels and for other animals, they can certainly contact us. And they should contact us at the email address volunteer@nebraskawildliferehab.org. And that way, if they're interested, then our volunteer coordinator can kind of point them in the right direction, and discuss with them what it takes to be a release site for animals.
Okay. And that's really great information, Laura, because I don't know if we ever had that conversation about being a release site. I mean, obviously, I live in the middle of the city, so I'm not eligible for a release site, but really people that live out on the perimeter or whatnot, that is a way to help and contribute to what you're doing and the organization.
And across the state of Nebraska, we can release animals. And so it can be anywhere in Nebraska. And also, you don't have to live on that property either. It can be land where nobody lives. So it changes what we could release there, because some animals need to be monitored more after release. But certainly anyone with land in the state, we would love to talk to them if they're willing.
And I know before we officially started recording, you said you have about 1,500 more animals than that that were brought to your facility than
Mhm.
you have had possibly in years, but during this time of the year for sure.
Yeah. So if you compare this year's numbers to last year's numbers, and last year was a really average year, we took in about 6,500 animals last year. We right now have 1,500 more animals that have been admitted than at the same time last year. So we're about
Okay.
1,500 ahead of pace, or 25% ahead of pace over last year. We have already passed the total number of animals that we received in 2023 in August. So, we still got those extra months to go.
Yeah.
And very shortly, we will surpass 7,000 animals for 2024.
Okay.
So it will end as a record year in our 25-year history, without question. I don't have nothing's going to change the fact that we're going to surpass our record number of animals, because we still have those 4 months to go.
Yep.
Maybe it's fitting. This is our 25th anniversary year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I guess we're celebrating with big numbers.
Well, I mean, first of all, congratulations on the
Thank
25th
you.
anniversary. I'm going to just mention a number and then I do want to talk about that. So 1,500 more animals than you typically have, $145 per animal, basically to get them from the time they enter your organization, your facility to when they're released or whatnot. That's $217,000.
It
That
is.
yeah. And that's
Yes. And
crazy.
so, the community is so wonderful to us. They
Yeah.
support everything we do,
Yeah.
but it did. So that number of animals, that excess animal number for 2024 has put us over $200,000 over our rehab budget for the year.
Yeah.
So it is a huge expenditure that we are needing to find donors and find funding for. Not expected, but I guess one of the great things about wildlife rehab is it's unpredictable, and
Yeah.
it's been a very unpredictable year.
Yeah. So let's just talk briefly. Okay, 25 years. I know you guys are celebrating that anniversary. How did this all begin? I mean, who cared enough to say we need this?
Hmm. Yeah, it wasn't me. People often think that it was me, but in 1999, a group of really amazing human beings came together and formed Nebraska Wildlife Rehab. At that time, they were receiving about 1,500 animals a year, and it was all home-based, all volunteer care. I started in January of 2001, so about a year and a half or so after the inception of the organization when I moved back to Omaha. And I've been with them since.
Yeah.
We got our first wildlife center in 2010, December of 2010, and that was in Louisville. And we kept that wildlife center until we purchased our M Street property and renovated it. And we've been so fortunate to have the support of our community. We now have the best equipped wildlife hospital in the country.
Yeah.
And our veterinary staff provides just amazing care for our animals, including fracture repair, endoscopy. We have a CAT scan. We have such amazing equipment that we can use to help animals. But not only that, to also train professionals in veterinary medicine, especially in exotics and wildlife. And so we're really honored to be in the position that we are today. 25 years seems like a long time, but it kind of has gone by in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I was at just a gathering a month or two ago and really got to you did a presentation and somebody else in the organization did and really got a better understanding of what happens when people bring animals to you. And also, like you said, I just feel like it's so special that we are setting, we meaning you, are really creating something that can help organizations around the country. I mean, really high level thinking that's here in Omaha.
Yeah, and we really hope to, and we have great collaborators in
Yeah.
this community too. We are often in discussions with the Omaha Zoo, with the Lincoln Children's Zoo, particularly with their veterinary staffs, talking about collaborative research and things that we can do to help each other.
Yeah.
But we're doing in-house research right now to learn more about native wildlife, especially on the veterinary side, and to share that information with zoos and species holding facilities. And then we also are participate in One Health for public health and
Mhm.
are helping lots of partners around the country doing their research on tick-borne illnesses, on COVID, on West Nile virus, on rabies. So we work kind of across the country that way. And then we are ensuring that we're networked so that we can share the data that we collect.
Yeah. That's just, first of all, amazing and awesome. And I just encourage everyone to go to your website and look at all the different things that you're doing. As we're here, and we're going to wrap up here like in a minute or two. You know, we had the storm, still, doing, recovering from the storm. But as we get into, here we are almost, I mean, September. What do people need to be looking out for in regards to wildlife? And what, yeah, kind of, I know you have like these ebbs and flows throughout the year because everything changes depending on the season
Yes.
with you guys. So, yeah.
So baby season's winding down, but cottontail rabbits are still having babies and will throughout September. So that's definitely babies to look out for. There are still young squirrels out there. They're kind of starting to venture from the nest. So there will be some squirrel things going on. Our bigger animals like, raccoons and foxes and coyotes, those guys should be mostly done with youngsters. But we just got like an 8-week-old bobcat last week.
Really? Okay.
She's
Wow.
adorable, but yeah, so we got her from
Yeah.
Central Nebraska.
Yeah.
So there's still a little bit of that straggler stuff. There's still some young birds out there. But what happens as we move into the fall is then we end up into migratory bird season, and Nebraska's on the central flyway. So when people are looking out for wildlife they can help, there will be a lot of injured birds during migration. In addition to that, there's a couple of things that people can do to help wildlife. One, to prevent window strikes, which are a huge problem that can kill birds during migration and other times of year, is to make sure that their windows are covered, or they can get window decals or window dye that they can use that's temporary, but it helps the birds see the windows so they don't fly into them. Also, keeping their lights off at night, especially out in the country. I mean, it also would be downtown Omaha, but that's a little bit harder. But out in the country, if you can turn all your lights off at night, it helps prevent birds from getting confused during migration and coming down when they should be flying. A lot of birds migrate at night.
Really? I did not know that. Okay.
And so those things can help migratory wildlife. And then for Nebraska Wildlife Rehab, the busiest thing that happens the thing that makes our winters busy is that we are a very large bat rehabilitation facility, getting between 500 and 600 bats every year. And those we start keeping for artificial hibernation usually in about late October. So when we're lucky, we kind of slow down between mid-September and late October. And then we start to get busier again as our bats come in.
Yeah.
And then baby season starts again at the end of February.
Okay. Wow. I mean, it truly is. I mean, there's something different, I think, almost every month that you're thinking about, but looking at in quarters and also the seasons changing. So, wow. Any events coming up that people can attend? And I know, so I'll let you just speak to that for a minute and then direct people to your website.
We've got a couple. So for us, we're talking on Wednesday. Tomorrow night on August 29th, which is a Thursday, we are launching a wildlife wheat beer. So it's our first beer collaboration, and we're doing this one with Pint 9 Brewing Company in La Vista. And they have been, Leah and Jimmy have been amazing partners. And so we're going to do a bunch of stuff with them this year. But the first thing that we're doing is we're launching a beer. And that beer, so we have a launch party. The beer is on draft. It's called Wildlife Wheat. And we do get a portion of every beer sold. But it's also been canned in these really cool cans with art designed by Michaela, one of our employees. But the art is by Grace Gard, who is a local artist. And so those cans will also be sold in 4-packs. So if you can't be at the event, you can go to Pint 9 when they're open and buy a 4-pack while supplies last of Wildlife Wheat. And I think we have 600 4-packs that are going to be available for sale when they're gone.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yep. And so then also with Pint 9 in November, we will have a trivia night out there. And in November, we're also their Pints for a Purpose nonprofit, which means that if you go to Pint 9 on a Wednesday night in November, $1 of every beer sold comes to Nebraska Wildlife Rehab.
That's awesome.
So, yep. So we've got all that going on, and then not quite an event, but we are doing, we're reviving a really fun old fundraiser that we've done. And that is, we are working with Chocolata Bay, the chocolatier that's now in Bellevue. And we're going to be selling wildlife chocolates. And so that will start around the middle of October and go through about December 1st, at a time when it's cool enough to ship chocolate so people from all over the country can buy them. And it's also at holiday time, so people can buy them for a gift. They're exquisite. They're an amazing company, and Chocolata Bay makes these beautiful.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful chocolate. So I know. So we're talking about tomorrow night being the 29th, which I know our interview it'll air in the first week of September. So I just telling everybody that go buy a 4-pack of beer, and the chocolates will be on sale come November.
Mid-October. Yep.
Okay, mid-October. And then let's just, before we end, other ways, I know financially it's so important. Other ways people can contribute. What do you need?
So at this time of year, the way that people can help, of course, is financial donations, sharing, like signing up to follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or sign up for our email list. If you share those things, more people know about us, and that is always a good thing for us. It is also the end of gardening season. And if people have leftover produce in their gardens, we can't take all of it, but there is a lot of it that we can take and feed to the animals. So if people have excess pumpkins, zucchini, apples on their trees, although we're getting a lot of apples right now, as well as like acorns and walnuts, if people are pulling them out of their yard, those are things that we can keep and feed to our animals. So kind of think about that. If they call us, we have a whole list at the front desk that we can talk people through. It's also on our website. Right now we are good with towels. We have enough towels and things like that now, but thinking into the future, we normally take towels and newspaper, paper towels, things like that. People like to buy dog and cat food for us. We take all of those goods as well.
I'm just realizing I'm just like getting blinded by the light over here, but it's okay. And I'm looking this way because I am on your website. There's so much information here on your website, nebraskawildliferehab.org. So encourage everybody to go here and and see ways they can donate. You guys have an education is so great. That's a whole nother conversation that we can have at a different time. But how you can help, and truly wildlife to me is just such a gift to us humans that are occupying the planet, and the wildlife are, I think, here to, they greet us, and they're here for our enjoyment. They just add so much to our lives. And I can't imagine a day without my wildlife in my backyard, or when I go on trips. Truly a gift that they're giving us. We're not giving it to them. They're giving us a gift. So, So, Laura, any final words before I let you go?
No, I appreciate you so much, Andy, and I appreciate a chance to talk about Nebraska Wildlife Rehab. I feel the same way about wildlife as you do, and I will talk about it all day long. But I really appreciate it, and we really appreciate our community, especially at times like these when we're a little overwhelmed and really need their support.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Laura, thank you so much for all that you do, and for everybody involved in Nebraska Wildlife Rehab. So again, thank you.
Thanks, Andy.